I call the meeting to order. Will y'all please stand for the invocation and the pledge, please? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity that you have given us to meet here and to take care of some business for the parish. We ask you that we make wise decisions that are the best thing for everybody involved. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray for our soldiers and our police officers and firemen. We ask that you always keep them safe in their service. Dear Heavenly Father, please guide, guard, and direct us and forgive us of our sins. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Please follow me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there any guest or public comments? Or I skipped it, or is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Any guest or public comments? We'll move on to our agenda items. This is a presentation from Upland Road and R2 Rentals for solid waste, and Mr. John Sutherland is going to be telling us about this. You can sit right there.
I think I have enough of these to go around, and then these you might have to share. So I'll start here with those. And then they look like y'all can share. Okay, 3 of y'all. And then I think I've given you.
Yeah, I got one.
And then y'all. And
Is this the shareable one?
that's the shareable one, yes. And just in case nobody will share with you. So.
Look, we ain't gonna reach over there.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come here. Full disclosure, 120 years ago, my great-grandfather was run out of this parish. The family story is that he left for a job in Arkansas, but it may be that he still owes some of your family's money. So I apologize in advance, but I'm not here to pay my great-grandfather's debts. What I am here to do is talk to you a little bit about what I would consider a viable opportunity. This is a project where we would utilize your existing waste stream from arguably one of your most important assets, and that, of course, is the Mundy landfill. Just for a little background on me, several years ago, I was asked by the Department of Environmental Quality to go around and work with different landfills around the state dealing with a way to better enforce what was known as Subtitle D regulations, closing out what were open dumps and moving to a more sanitary landfill. So as such, I was able to go around and visit every landfill in the state, as well as continue on visiting and touring, working with different landfills around the state. So I've been to Mundy landfill several times, a few years ago, and then, of course, very recently again. And so if I could sort of give you sort of a heads up on this, I've been looking for a number of years in my own consulting research to find a project in which we could capture the raw material value of landfills and the waste stream and simply do something with it. Something beyond simply a subsidized recycling or composting or other waste diversion program. my preference on this was to work in a partnership with a publicly owned landfill so that there could be a better public-private partnership, but also something else, so that there wouldn't be a dependence on either federal or state monies, so that this thing could be privately driven, create local jobs, improve a local tax base, so that a partnership could be developed where the entity, in this case Mundy, the police jury, would be able to capture the full value of what they have. And so after the course, and I'd visited here about 5 years ago, the economics were not very good in terms of being able to fully capture the value, not because of there was anything with Mundy, it was more with the group that I was working with. However, the group Upland Road and R2 Rentals is a Louisiana-based collection, solid waste collection business, and Upland is a financial division, primarily capturing that financial market associated with pretty large capital investment projects. One of the questions that always comes up is why us? And if you would, this first thing that I gave you guys, and many of you may or may not be aware of this, there's a federal program that deals with what are known as opportunity zones. Now, I'm going to use a word you probably don't get to hear very often. This is a bipartisan effort. Republicans and Democrats love it for different reasons, but they both love it. It was started last part of President Obama, expanded under Trump, expanded under Biden. And the idea is this: if you are able to invest in long-term capital projects, there's a way for you as the investor to realize an offsetting of your capital gains. But specifically, these are for like public projects. So it wouldn't be something for like, you know, a new convenience store or a new private thing that didn't create a lot of jobs. So that's one of the factors. And as you see there, Mansfield is surrounded by this, surrounded by opportunity zones that any type of investment in there realizes a certain savings and offsetting of capital gains. The next page, of course, is looking at those, and this is from a 2013, so it's a little outdated. The 2013 permitted landfills around the state. And as you see there, many of these, obviously those in the southern part of the state, I had less interest in working with them for a couple of reasons. One, because of the prevalence of flooding, also hurricanes, a whole range of things, but also, too, to be quite blunt, Mundy's landfill is, simply put, one of the best run, I would say, arguably the best run landfill in the state. I have visited a whole lot of landfills. And I mean, from the moment you step on there to the scales, to the personnel, to the expertise, you have a superintendent out at the landfill, David O'Mary, who is fantastic, lots of years of experience, and just a tremendous asset. The other thing, too, is in terms of some of these privately owned, many of these don't have the useful life that's left. And so if you go to the next page, you sort of see, and again, this is from 2013, you see the various remaining capacity in terms of years, operating from the assumption that the waste stream just simply parallels population, waste obviously being a function of population growth. So if you take a look, for example, down to the Mundy landfill, what you'll find is the estimates there was putting it close to about 20, 23 years of useful life. Again, 10 years ago, so probably a lot closer, with no more expansions, to 8 to 10 years, which meant that prior to anything that's waste diversion, additional reuse, recycling, composting, et cetera, that the idea of not opening another cell, there's probably limitations there. The cost associated with opening up another cell to continue utilizing, again, one of your best assets, means you're going to have to invest more money. So that put Mundy on the map as well. So again, the idea is that Mundy, being very well run in a place that there would be more sort of bang for the buck in terms of the investment, the opportunity to get in that zone for additional investment. And so when we started sort of filtering through what the possibilities were, the Mundy landfill seemed to be the best place to start. I would say that Louisiana as a whole potentially may have as many as 2, perhaps 3 of these. Again, unless you get down to the southern part of the state where you have more population, more waste stream, which again, because of weather problems, hurricanes, not particularly interested in that. The other thing too about this is that the type of investment, and I have this packet here from Upland Road. In this packet that you see here is a whole thing about, the technology, and I won't go through all of that. But one of the things that they do, and this is what was really exciting to me about it, they take existing technologies, proven technologies, put them all under one roof so that they can capture the full either BTU or energy value or the raw materials value. So unlike, say, a typical recycling facility, which, by the way, nothing at all against recycling centers except they don't make any money, they don't typically produce any new jobs, they are a net cost to parishes. This, on the other hand, is not a net cost. In fact, I'm not coming here asking anything in terms of money, not one nickel. I'm not asking for anything other than the commitment to provide what you're already doing now, and that is your waste stream. They take the plastics, reduce them down to their basic pellet, and sell those back into the market, which they've already got the markets. The corrugated cardboard. As many of you may or may not know, about 3 years ago, pre-COVID, there was a collapse in the Chinese recycling of corrugated cardboard to the point that it's really pushed it back in the States for the first time. Metals have always been higher value in many ways. The idea is to take each piece of the waste stream, so just as an example, say 100 tons come in the door. The idea is to be able to capture either the BTU value, capture the raw materials value of about 85% of that, so about 15 tons you still have. That 15 tons are going to be some food wastes, some other organics that basically have no value associated with them. That would be returned to the Mundy landfill. So you would still get your gate fees for the 100 tons, and again using that as an example, the 100 tons, although you would only use up airspace for about 15 tons. And this, to me, is the attractive piece of this for the parish. And that is, you can continue getting your gate fees at the same rate you are, but not deplenish one of your most valuable assets, and that is your landfill. So instead of having to use 100% of your landfill and getting X number of dollars per ton, you still get that same amount per ton, and you're only using up a smaller part of it, because we take the rest of it, and that would be recycled, some of it composted, some of it beneficially reused. Now, why? Well, here's the big piece for you guys. The estimated number, and we can, anytime someone comes in and promises a huge number of jobs, you, like me, we're always suspect of that. The temporary construction jobs may be anywhere from 250 to 350. The long-term permanent jobs are closer to 400. Now, do we have 400 jobs in this area? Number one, no. And this is why I think the partnership has to be so good between us. We want to work with local technical schools to develop programs so that we can train local people first. My view is this, is that locals should benefit from this first. So whether it's local people getting the jobs or local vendors being the first ones who can provide the electrical, provide the plumbing, provide the construction, whatever, even the food services. Locals should benefit from this first. The other thing, too, about this is that clearly this is going to be a program that we'll have to reach outside the area to be able to provide all of those jobs, say, from day one. That means we'll work with, say, our friends at LSU Shreveport, our friends down in Natchitoches, through the technical community colleges, so that we create, say, a certification process. So day one, these people are ready to take the job, come in there with good paying jobs. Whether or not the proceeds of this are dedicated for roads, everybody is always needing more money dedicated to roads, and I would assume DeSoto is no different than a lot of places. That really is a decision for you guys. This is not me trying to come in here and tell you how to do anything, only to say, here's an opportunity to, in many ways, reevaluate and look at your most important, I think one of the most important for sure, sources of income, and that's the landfill. That landfill generates a lot of money, and there's a way for you to keep that airspace, not deplenish it, and continue to make that level of money. Also, because clearly we're going to need a certain amount of waste coming into the facility, you also get a piece of any additional revenue that comes in to the facility itself. And again, those are fine points for, you guys to work out. But in terms of, and I've addressed a couple of questions in meeting with the president and the vice president of the jury, and I certainly appreciated their time and yours. One of the questions was, well, what happens if this whole thing goes south? It fails. I have told that I've talked to Upland Road about it, and they're fully committed to put together a bond or an escrow account to cover any waste that has to be cleaned up if the facility goes under. So in terms of risk, and there may be, there's always risk in anything, the risk of having to take care of waste that's not going into the landfill, cleaning up the facility, that money can be set aside. But I think the potential for additional tax revenue, preserving that airspace, creating local jobs, local training, and improving other things that you've wanted to do but simply didn't have the resources to do it, I think it's one of those. And again, tapping into this instead of covering it up and burying it, not utilizing that asset, this is something that could be a better utilized asset for the parish. I'm glad, of course, to take any questions. I didn't want to go on too long, but I think that many of you, in fact, if you want to at some point, there is, after that one page, there's a couple of links that you can look at. And if for some reason you can't, please feel free to email me or call, and I'm glad to send you a link so you can sort of see this different piece of this in action, okay? So,
Just making sure it's clear what you said. No cost to the parish,
that's right.
and the recycle that you're not gonna use from the parish recycle, we get to get it back
That's correct. That's correct.
at a cost.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's not a cost to you guys.
Right.
Right. We pay for that. So, I mean, the other thing too is we're talking about municipal solid waste. So at no time do we open the floodgates for any industrial or hazardous waste. Because to be quite blunt, there's really no sort of post-consumer market for that in the first place. So this isn't, we're not going to get into that. We will, of course, deal with some construction and demolition or C&D wastes. But again, those things have value. Concrete, okay,
Right.
rebar, wood, those things have a post-market value. But in terms of anything else, no, we would not be interested in that.
Okay.
I got a question, Mr. Chairman.
You will.
You had stated that, I don't know about the 80-15 and that type stuff, but you said we would get a part of any additional thing, like something that y'all went out and brought into the landfill. How much is our part? That's not gonna be.
Well, and it's a good question here. What I think, and I think maybe Greg had said this, if we keep the gate fee the same, then it avoids sort of an internal accounting nightmare. So the amount of money you get is the same amount of money regardless. You see what I'm saying? So whether it crosses our scale first, and what I would say, just for simplicity, let it cross our scale, weigh it, tip it, send you the money, and then the residual, weigh it, tip it, send you that money as well. And again, the concept is to avoid using up your airspace. You can get the full impact of what you have. So right now, depending on how you're looking at the total waste stream, you're in the 1,400 to 1,600 range. What we would like to see is it come a little bit closer to, say, 2,000, 2,500 tons per day. And so almost immediately you get an increase in the amount of revenue, but not a decrease in your airspace.
Richard?
Excuse me. Good
Yes,
evening.
sir.
I'm sorry I was late, but who separates these different items?
You mean at the facility?
Sir.
Okay. And
Who's responsible for that?
yeah, totally. Yeah, what happens is, just like you would, say, at a transfer station, okay? I think probably most of you've seen it, where just waste comes in. Sometimes there's source separation. Mostly it goes into an area where it's compacted and reloaded, say in a 30-ton truck, so you avoid all the airspace that you're not shipping air. All of that comes into the facility, and the facility is under negative pressure so that you don't have air emissions or smells. The first thing happens when something smells, what happens? Your phone rings off the hook. Hey, you guys have got this facility. So we're very mindful of that. But all of it goes into the facility. Some of it is source separated according to weight or volume or type. Some of it's manual. A lot of it, though, is mechanical. But the parish is not responsible for any of that.
Will this affect any of our people's jobs?
You mean at the landfill? No. What I would anticipate is that you guys would have a sort of a reciprocal arrangement where if your people wanted to go back and forth, there's an idea for that. But in terms of like their jobs, they may be the most qualified to come and work at this place. I can't say whether or not you'll need the same whatever number of people you have out there, but Upland Road would be glad to provide jobs for those people. I will say this, in terms of oversight and management, it won't require as much because you've got less volume, but you still will need probably the same staff out at the landfill. That way nobody, if we come in and you lose a lot of parish jobs, create these, and none of your parish job people haven't, that's not fair to anyone right there. But yeah, that's one of the reasons we're real mindful, and again, wanting to work with the parish on this so that those are the kinds of issues we address.
One more.
Dwayne?
Where do you have one of these facilities operating now?
There's a collection, excuse me, I was enjoying one of your peppermints.
I got some more right here if you want some.
Well, as long as you don't tell my wife, I'm not supposed to eat a lot of sugar. So, there are pieces of this here, and here, and in the handout that I gave you, you can see, I'd say 90% of it operating in different locations. We've added a couple of things, and there's about 56 patents that are associated with the process. So part of the apparatus and part of the process are all protected technologies. But to be quite fair, a lot of this is really off-the-shelf technologies that have existed. There's nothing particularly new or novel about separating plastics from paper or glass from plastics. The novelty is really in the back end of this, reducing the waste stream back to, say, a pellet form of plastic that can be reutilized. For example, on the cardboard. We've already started looking at some packaging places close by. Shreveport, for example, the Amazon facility. Amazon needs tons and tons of boxes all the time. Being able to provide those boxes and the raw materials from this facility, that gives us the market to go in there. The plastic pellets, various types of pellets, we can go into those markets. And so, to answer your question, there are bits and pieces. This would be, in DeSoto, the first fully integrated system like this. But everything is a proven technology, so it's not, you're not being experimented on, in other words.
Let me ask you this.
Yes,
You
sir.
mentioned the proceeds that we get from this particular operation we could use on roads. You have an estimate, so that's proceeds that you will pay the parish, right? For your operation. You have an estimate of how much it might be?
Well, that's one thing that we'll work with Michael's office on this. It's, in our estimate, again, totally
Right,
an
understandable.
estimate at this point.
Understandable.
We think that by the time we're in full operation, the amount of money, the proceeds coming from the landfill could be 2.5 to 3 times what you've got right now, but utilizing 85% less airspace. And so the trade-off is more revenue, less airspace. And so, I appreciate you asking that, because this leads to something else. While Upland Road and R2 Rentals are not necessarily interested in accessing, say, federal or state monies, when you're talking about an economic development project like this, Louisiana Economic Development, okay, EDA out of Austin, Department of Transportation, various development agencies, Delta Regional Authority, for example, which y'all are part of in here. All of those organizations can provide additional assistance and grants to the parish so that you can use this project to leverage other projects. And so it may be that you see an opportunity to expand, say, technical college. It may be an opportunity to reinvest in some high school programs. I mean, again, I'm just throwing those out there. The idea is, though, we can work with you, the parish, in terms of identifying some of those other opportunities so that you can access some of those federal or state grant monies, again, to leverage the private money that's coming in here so that you can do some other things that you want to do.
We have a company who are looking at setting up an operation that would entrap the methane gas that's escaping. Would that interfere with your operation?
No, it should not. I mean, you're talking about, the methane gas operation is going to exist on the current sales at the Mundy landfill now. This would not be at the landfill. This would be an adjacent property. So I would think in many ways there's a synergistic relationship between the two so that they could be compatible. One of the issues that we looked at specifically with Mundy is that, and this is true regardless, okay, of every landfill in the state, and it's what happens when the federal government writes regulations for everybody, not taking into account, say, local conditions. Every landfill in Louisiana has a problem with leachate, the water that comes off of it. There are some opportunities for us to collaborate on this, and the same thing would be true on the methane gas side of this. One of the component pieces to what is being proposed here is an anaerobic digester that could produce the methane. That would be an easy partnership, and if we're talking about being able to have the properties close to one another, there's no reason whatsoever there couldn't be cooperation there. So no, I don't see that. I don't know exactly how much, say, fresh garbage they would need, say, over a 15, 20-year life cycle in order to do it. I don't know what the rate of return is, but that's something that would be an easy fit. And again, the same would be true for us taking care of some of the leachate coming from the landfill itself. Yes, whoever.
You said, you said the operation would be at an adjacent property. Is that property that we would need to furnish for you, or they would furnish themselves?
No, we'd buy the property. And
How close to the landfill would it need to be?
I'd love it to be next door to it if you want to know the truth. I mean, again, to be totally transparent, I came here about 5 years ago, and I forget the guy, Wartell was his name? Okay, I met and talked with him, and there was some, there was some issues there, and we weren't ready for the project. There was a couple of things, but if we were able to closely have the facility next door to it, for example, one, it would be very easy for us to go back and forth exchanging the leachate, the gas, et cetera, but also you would want it as close as possible anyway so that you don't have waste spread out all over the place. There's another property across the interstate that I looked at, and then a property on the other side opposite of Mundy. The answer to it is you don't have to provide the property. Upland Road will purchase the property and develop everything. But again, this is where I think that the leveraging of some state dollars, for example, the state dollars may be willing to come in there and provide the road access, water, sewage, electrical, and all of that through some LED monies that are available. So again, but there's no requirement that you have to provide anything other than the trash itself. I think, Richard, you had a question?
Two
Yes, sir.
questions.
Yes, sir.
How many acres are y'all looking at? I mean,
About 60,
About 60?
yes.
Okay. And the other question was, how long would the contract be that y'all looking at doing with us?
The initial contract, the preference would be for a 10-year access to the garbage with a renewable, say, every 5 years after that. Now, again, if obviously, if this doesn't, if it's not what we all anticipate it being, the worst thing that happens is you still have more revenue and you still have your airspace. The downside to it is not a huge downside. But a 10-year commitment, I think, is important so that they can secure the financing they need on the private side so that it's 100% privately funded. Yes, sir.
So you'll be accepting all the trash that we currently have now. Will you also be looking for new customers so you can go out and say, accept trash from DeSoto Parish or anywhere else and be bringing it down here?
I think, when you look at, say, we talk about
Just use it as an
watersheds, when you look at a waste shed, because of transportation costs, you have a certain limitation on the area. I think South Caddo may be about as far north, depending on if you access, say, a transfer station. Natchitoches may have some interest because to be fair, they're paying a huge number right now on their gate fees if they had it. But, sitting down with David O'Mary, you come to that 2,000 tons a day pretty quickly. I mean, you're almost there anyway. And so there wouldn't be so much excess waste that you've got to bring in.
One more question. Mr.
Sure.
If there was agreement made between the company and the jury, how long would it take to complete this, to get it up and running, your facility?
This is a estimate, okay? From, say, the moment, let's say, day one, the contract is signed until you are accepting your first truck across the way. I would say you're talking about a 2.5, maybe 3.5 year window. Anytime you're talking about a 60-acre facility, and to be quite fair, the time frame works real well because in that, say, 2.5, 3 year window, training of employees, working with local vendors, training people, doing everything, the permitting process. I mean, nothing happens very quickly. I mean, if I told you, in a year, not a chance of that happening. You're talking about 2.5 best case, probably closer to 3.5. But that gives us plenty of time, one, to access, as you mentioned, additional waste streams, but also, two, to make sure, at some point, you want to make sure that this is being done right, which is another reason why it's so important for the parish to have sort of us together, shoulder to shoulder on this.
So you don't have another operation like this in existence now, do you?
No one does.
Okay.
Now, there are bits and pieces. It's like the idea many years ago of putting together, at a landfill, a recycling facility, a compost facility, and a waste-to-energy facility. All proven technologies, but all put together under one roof. And so the idea here would be to take these existing technologies, this process in here, they call it the Smart Eco Hub, various names for this, and this would become the showcase unit.
Go ahead.
I didn't know if you wanted non-committee members to speak or not.
Anybody may speak who wants to.
So essentially, you would sift through everything. Everything would come to you. You would sift through it. What you couldn't use or recycle or whatever you want to call it would come back to us. But we would only get paid for what comes to us, correct?
No, you would get paid for everything that crosses our scale.
So we get paid the same thing we're getting paid today.
You get paid the exact same thing you're paid today, exactly, except that because we'll be taking additional waste, you'll also get that amount as well, even though, again, I'm using 85%. Okay, it could be 83, it could be 87%. That's about what we're seeing, is about that 85% range. So 15 of those 100 tons would go back to Mundy. The other 85 would be recycled, reused, capture the BTU value, all of that, so it could be put back into productive use.
So would you anticipate this accelerating our capacity of intake every day, or?
We would like it to be at that 2,000 to 2,500 tons per day, so you're talking about another, what, 900 to 1,500 tons per day at the facility, but not coming into Monday. You would probably, we're talking about you guys would having maybe, instead of getting 1,600 tons a day, closer to about 100, 120 tons a day. So you can sort of do the math in terms of how that preserves your airspace, so you don't have to invest in developing another cell and getting the additional revenue as well.
Do you anticipate any DEQ or any liability issues? Because I know we're responsible for the air and the water and everything next to us. Would this harm that, hurt that, or affect that in any way?
In fact, it's one of the reasons that I gravitated to this project in the first place. Full disclosure, my background is political and environmental regulatory, environmental legal. And one of the things that I've loved about this is that there are no additional demands in terms of pollution. Everything is contained, everything is within one area so that nothing is ever exposed. There's not even the potential for harm because everything is contained in there. However, and I think, Greg, you had brought this up when we had talked, was the idea of creating like an escrow fund to take care of any type of either liabilities, whatever the case is. But we reuse, we're not a net producer of additional waste. And that includes the wastewater that we reuse and recycle on site as well, which is why we can, and that's something for us to work out, we can accept leachate from you guys to be part of our wastewater system as well, so that you no longer have that compliance issue. But the facility would be permitted separately. That way, regardless, the parish does not have additional liability. Does that make sense? So we're not on the property. You guys simply provide that waste stream, and that property and that part of this project must meet all the DEQ requirements.
I'm assuming you've done your homework and you're aware of our contract with another company now that brings us trash.
Yeah.
Would this in any way affect that?
Doesn't hurt them, it doesn't hurt you. You still receive the trash. The only difference is it would be diverted so we can reuse. That would be it. I mean, this does not affect any existing contracts that you have, in the sense that we simply are going, instead of you burying it in the landfill, taking up airspace, we capture either BTU value or all the other raw material values of it, and then give you the sort of the residual of it. But it doesn't affect anything in terms of that waste stream.
So they would dump their trash, if that contractor came down here with a load of trash, they'd dump it in your yard now,
Yes.
and you would process it, and you would bring it to David?
Right, I'd bring whatever residuals.
We would never leave our property,
No.
come to your property?
That would probably be, I mean, obviously we do whatever you want to do. It just seems like taking it to yours first, then taking it to ours next, and then taking the residuals back.
No, I'm saying
adds a
would you be
transportation.
responsible for getting it from your property to our property, or were we
100%.
responsible?
Yeah, we would, no parish vehicles would be required to take it from that property to yours. So it doesn't add additional costs. I mean, here's the thing, if the project doesn't stand on its own, if we're simply saying, well, give us our trash, but we're gonna still utilize your trash trucks, and we're gonna, that may not even be a favor. So what we're talking about is no additional liability, no additional costs associated with it, and you don't wear out your trash trucks, you don't wear out and use up your airspace as well. Which again, when you look at, a lot of parishes have mismanaged their landfills to the point where it's a liability. Y'all's landfill is a true asset for DeSoto. It's a very different animal. When I've gone and visited other landfills and they're eating up their airspace, they have got no place to go because they're boxed in typically by water bodies. If you're south, say of I-10 or south, you're just boxed in. And DEQ is just not going to permit a new landfill. I mean, that's just not going to happen anytime, I'd say, in 15, 20 years maybe. They're more likely to give you the ability to expand a cell, but if you're boxed in, you've got no place to go. Again, this is something that DeSoto should be very proud of, that you guys have cultivated an asset that has economic value that can be utilized to create, again, additional tax revenue, local jobs, and all of those other things associated with this.
How big were you telling us the other day that it's under roof?
Under roof, again, depending on the layout of the property, maybe 6 to 10 acres under roof. So, I mean, it's not, but you need the full 60, driving trucks, be able to go around, store equipment, everything else, office space, everything else. The waste station takes a lot of space. But about, again, depending on the shape of the property, anywhere from 6, maybe as high as 10 acres. I mean, I know it's a lot.
Yeah.
But so much of the process is automated that it can't be exposed to elements. So it has to be under roof, which again, because of that, we have the negative pressure and the filtration of the air, so you don't have any fugitive emissions or odors that come off site.
When y'all, just say you did sort of get a contract with, when would y'all start? How long would it take to build this?
Let's say that we did that, say at noon on a Saturday. By noon on one Saturday, we would be scouting for properties. I mean, to be fair, we're already looking. I mean, 5 years ago, I came around and scouted around as well. We're already looking at some places, but again, there are certain conditions, about 60 acres, and also too, the geologic formation of the property. It has to be pretty solid, which is another advantage that DeSoto has. I mean, to be quite fair, building something in, say, lower Assumption Parish, you go down about 10 inches, you've hit water table. And so that's just not an option. And so having a stable area where you can put the machinery, the trucks, everything else, but we're pretty hot to try to get started right away.
But how long would it take? I mean, if you did to start the facility and finish it?
Well, as he asked earlier, again, that 2.5 to 3.5 year window.
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, about that. And obviously, there's some things, and you guys may be able to help on some of this in terms of, helping out with public hearings, because clearly, for anything of this size, you'll have to have. But we've got a pretty good group of environmental attorneys for the permitting process. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in. I think the permitting process will probably take longer than the construction process for, say, the base pad. But, I mean, you want to do it right, so.
I'm sort of slow on all this stuff, so bear with me. You used the 100 tons as a gross number as to what would come in, and it would be reduced down to 15 tons coming to us and to our landfill. So what I'm comprehending is that if we built a new sale out there, that we've just got one built and we're planning on another one, that if we plan this sale now to last for 10 years, it's going to last us 30 years or so.
Again, depending
On how much actually comes
Right,
in. I'm
and-
just using your
yes.
115.
Yes, that's about right.
So, our $3 million sale would last us a whole lot longer than it would at our current rate of trash intake.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here that are the unknown piece of this, variables such as, if we added additional population to, say, the city of Mansfield. I'm certain the mayor wouldn't mind that, depending on how they voted, okay? So, depending on additional businesses. I mean, what you can anticipate is additional revenue, but the decrease in amount, in the airspace that's utilized. 25 to 30 years for that sale, I think that's probably about right. That's probably about right, which is, for a $3 million investment, pretty good.
And I'm just throwing that out. I don't know the actual cost of the sale or the years it's supposed to last. Mr. Baker does that. He handles all that. But I can say also the trickle-down effect of other businesses coming in here that y'all may need to operate your facility. And I don't know, oxygen type stuff, or compressed gases, or whatever you may use in there. would be an opportunity for somebody to put in a local supply house for y'all to use or whatever, to buy stuff that y'all need.
Well, and I'll give you, and this is an example, not a great one, but it's the one that came to mind. A friend of mine runs the film facility down in Harahan that makes the movies in the state. And I was asking him, if you've got a cast of, say, 100, he said, easily you've got 25 to 3,000 more jobs created. I said, like what? He said, well, someone's got to build the set, paint it, electrical. But he says, you wouldn't believe the number of food services that open up. Now, you think about that just on the construction side of it, then you add to it the workers that are part of that on a daily basis. And so, to be quite fair, there's going to be some opportunities that we can't even imagine for private citizens, local people to make money in this sector, again, that we may not even have the first idea that they come up with. So,
Will all of our constituents be required to come to your facility first, or how would that work? I mean, just anybody that's bringing trash, anything, would they have to go through you all first, or?
What I think, and it's a good question, what I think would be the best, most ideal situation is that you don't do anything different than what you're doing now. Once you get, the citizenry educated about dropping it off here, doing this, I think you can still do that. There could be, and this is why it's so important to be close together.
Yes.
It'd be very easy to say, hey, instead of bringing it across our gate, here's this. There'll be some exceptions, of course, and you just accept the waste at Monday and go about it. But I would say those are going to be very, very small exceptions. If somebody came up and they had a truckload of construction waste, that's not going to break the budget one way or the other. But I think what you want to do is keep it as close to the regular way that you're doing now, because it takes a very long time for people who are creatures of habit to, you don't want to change people's habits. Yeah.
Thank you.
How many FTEs will be there once fully operational?
FTDs?
E's. Full-time employees.
I was thinking FTD. I was like, did I forget to send my wife flowers again? I mean, my goodness. No, full-time employees, what they estimate anywhere between 400 and 600. Now, they'll be in 3 shifts. So, whatever, 180, 170 people per shift, running 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. And so they would be full-time employees with benefits. So not part-time workers with no benefits.
What type of salaries would it be making?
Again, depending on, whether they're frontline workers or management work. I mean, there's a whole range of these things. I think what they talked about, and again, we're at that elementary stage, at that $17 to $19 an hour starting range, and then up to 22, depending for those line workers, and then clearly management and upper people having a different.
Okay.
We won't have any wealthy employees like Dave O'Mary working there, if that's what your question was. So.
Does that fall into?
I don't think we can afford Dave O'Mary. So.
So you're saying 85% of the trash that we're taking in is going to generate $25 million a year, at least?
Say that again?
You're only going to use 85% of our intake, right?
That's about right, yes. And again, it can fluctuate again, but that's about the right, and again, that based on the waste characteristics. So for example, if we have inclement weather and we have a lot of storm debris, that number can go up or down, depending on the type of storm debris.
So
If we have additional construction or additional consumer wastes, because we have, but that is the typical range right there. But 85% off of 2,000 to 2,500 tons per day will generate that level of income. Because remember, this doesn't work based upon federal or state taxes. This only works with a private company willing to put their money on the line and do this. To be fair, where do they make theirs? They make their money clearly on the backside of this by selling these raw products into markets. And those markets, they've already worked and established those relationships. So don't think of this as like, these typical, say, recycling projects in which you accumulate basically glass, paper, metals that have zero value. Okay? There's no point, glass recycling, it's, as an environmental person, it always is kind of rough for me because there is no value for recycled glass. It's sand and polymer, that's it. We're not running out of either one of those. So, but they are reducing these to their constituent pieces so they can sell these back into a market that's making additional value added.
Anybody got anything else?
One last question, would that fall into this opportunity zone?
It's
was
right
looking at the
there.
map.
That's one of the attractions for this. Yeah. It falls into that opportunity zone, which is another reason why I'm here talking to you guys and not talking, someplace else. The combination of a well-run landfill controlled by the parish, in an opportunity zone with a certain amount of waste ticks all the boxes for why this would be an ideal setting.
I'm sure the facility could max out after a certain amount. What do you anticipate to be the maximum amount you could take in a
Yeah,
day?
that's a,
I'd hate to know that we're making contracts with new customers to bring their garbage, and then you're making contracts over here with customers, and then all of a sudden we can't get it all into the facility.
and it's a question we've gone through a couple of times. I think that the absolute sort of upper limit is close to that 3,000, 3,200, which, if you look at, say, where we are DeSoto, okay, and draw, say, 150 miles around us, which is because of the cost of transportation, okay, and other private contracts here, and here that sort of, that's the absolute most that we could take. There is, clearly there's some other opportunities in the state, but it will never be a situation where we're out using DeSoto subsidizing us making money at another facility in which you don't realize the profit. Whatever we bring across that scale, that's part of your cut.
Well, I understand that, but I just want to know that we'll have a place for our trash or any contracts that we sign, and they're not going to show up, and then they're going to say, well, they turned us down. They said they were full.
That
or
I can
something like
assure you will never happen. This is another reason to have this, as I call it, an anchor tenant or an anchor trash provider. Having that relationship with DeSoto from day one means that, for all intents and purposes, you never worry about that sort of thing. And you always have a place for it, and you have an opportunity to grow that revenue and preserve your airspace out at the landfill. Yeah, it doesn't do you any good if all of a sudden you've got to send it, to Webster and pay $50 a ton. There's no point in doing that. Yes, sir.
Two easy questions. You may have already stated it, and I didn't hear it. You keep saying they as in Upland Road. What's your connection to all this?
My connection to it is that I manage all innovation and research for the University, Louisiana Monroe. I've been looking for something like this to bring to something in North Louisiana for a long time. To be fair, there's been very few innovations associated with garbage ever. We're still putting it in a hole, bearing assets. My role in it is terms of facilitating. I anticipate us, either at the university, 2-year, technical, community college, whatever, developing programs around this. I may or may not have a consulting role with these people on this, but ultimately my goal on this is to create something where ULM and our friends at LSUS or technical communities, even our friends up at BIPSI and Bossier, we work together to create certificates and degrees associated with it. So to be totally fair, yes, of course I have a vested interest. And my vested interest is in finding something like this. And if there's a consulting role that I can play in it, I'm glad to do that as well.
And second question, on the contract, what would be basic tenets of that contract? I mean, like, I know you mentioned 2.5 to 3.5 years to get going. So you sign it day one, you're down to 6.5, 7 by the time you get operational. Are there ways out, or is it? I mean, if it's not working for us and you, or us, or either one, is there a clause that allows us to cancel that? I mean, obviously it's not drawn yet, but I mean, do you anticipate that type thing?
You make contracts in anticipation of something bad happening so that both sides have the consensus building necessary to have a contract. I think the way that it, to me, would go is that you enter into contract the day one of the trash coming across the weights is when that 10 years starts. However, I think there's a couple of things in terms of, again, if I was advising DeSoto, that I would do on the front side to accelerate that, having various milestones in it where revenue comes back to the parish, say, upon celebration of the contract, a certain amount goes into an escrow fund, however you guys want to work it. Then when the first shovel of dirt is done, another milestone, and have it done like that way, that there are always these phases where you can measure success and keep people on track with this. Remember, the nice thing about this is because they're not federally or state funded by taxpayer dollars, the private motivation on this is to what? Get this thing up and running very, very quickly. However, not sacrificing any of the environmental contingencies that are important. So their motivation is pretty strong.
You know, we have a kind of small technical school here in Mansfield, right?
Yes,
And you will be utilizing them as well?
I think it's very important that they be part of this process, which is another reason that I've sort of scouted around the technical college, community colleges, whether we're talking about BIPSI or down in Natchitoches. There's lots of ways we can do this, but I think the technical college has to be on board with this almost from day one, because that's where we're going to train people to have these jobs.
Okay, good.
And developing a series of certifications where they come out of this ready to go to work. That's not going to be an overnight process either. And that's something that I think that the university, on us, we can help facilitate some of that.
Okay.
And to be totally fair, universities, four-year universities, are not real good about changing up programs to accommodate the workforce. Technical colleges often do a better job than we do. And that would be the place to start for that. And, but,
Can I ask a
and
question?
built on that, sorry, Michael, one thing to add to that is that unless local people benefit from this, not just the technical college, but the city, the parish, local vendors, people that live here already who need that opportunity, they should be the first ones that come to the table for this. I've seen too many of these projects in Louisiana where you propose something and all the people making nice salaries come in from another state. And the only people that get jobs locally are going to be minimum wage job seekers. Well, that's not even a benefit, a temporary benefit. We want something that people in DeSoto are very proud of to be part of. And having a good job with benefits, something that they can build a career on. Because the project is built to last 35, 40 years. I mean, that's a career. I mean, not for me, okay? I'm a little too young for that, so, but you understand what I'm saying.
Exactly.
And I think too, that's just a question of fairness, The people that need the most help should be able to get the most access to this, so it makes it work. I'm sorry, Michael.
That's okay. You mentioned, I don't know if you've mentioned this or not, but what's the initial investment that you anticipate y'all bringing to DeSoto Parish to build this facility going forward? I think at that, just to determine what kind of tax base you anticipate bringing.
The property, the construction, the turnkey price on this, on the low side is 750, possibly as high as 900 million. So the tax revenue, the equipment, the jobs, you see what I'm saying? So I mean, it's not, it's not cheap to do. One question I've got before, I don't remember if we talked about this or not, but the question is, well, why don't you just open up something and just open up your own landfill? Well, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to have a partnership so that we work together on this. And also too, again, DEQ is not gonna permit a landfill. And this isn't a landfill. You know, this is something very different from that. So
My last question for Mr.
I don't
Jones.
believe this is your
It's
last
gonna be my
question.
last, trust me.
Go ahead, I don't mind.
Now, you made me forget now. With the constituent, I mean, you mentioned about the technical colleges. Will you be required to have to go to those technical colleges to get
No.
the job? Okay.
No, look, you know, I grew up in the country where we actually learned how to do stuff. If you come to the table and you already have certain skills and you're ready to work, absolutely. I think what we don't want to do is create an artificial barrier for people who are ready to work. If we can create technical, community college, whatever it is, certifications, that certainly adds something to it. But if you've got people that basically, you know, are ready to work, and that's not a guarantee sometimes, okay? But you've got people who are ready to work and have certain skills. I mean, they can be trained in the course of, say, internally, 30, 60 days, they can be trained to do this. Having those skills means that they're simply ready to work day one.
Gotcha.
But no, the company is prepared to train in-house.
Yes, sir.
So that there are no economic or educational barriers for being able to work out there.
Thank you.
I was waiting for another question from you.
Okay, no, I'm through.
I think everyone else was too. That's all right. Anything else at this point?
Greg, you wanna see if the audience got something, a question?
That's fine. If anybody out there has a question,
I'm glad to answer it.
take one.
Wait, I just wanted to add something we met before.
Yeah.
But I wanted to add, he didn't talk about the money you're gonna save on your equipment out there, the operations costs and buying more equipment and those costs. And that's gonna even give you more money to keep in your kitty, do things that you need. It's gonna be a multi-layer deal here, if it works. It's gonna be multi-layer savings for you all, which is the saving is really income that you have to do other things with. And we know, Mr. Larry, what they got a lot of equipment maybe down right now. And it'll give them also time to get their landfill, some things that he probably got 2 or 3 years he can work on doing some things at landfill to get it, am I right, mister? To get it where he needs to get it. So these things will help tremendously. I just want to bring that out. A whole lot of opportunity helping the landfill. You know, employees got a lot to do right now if they don't bring any waste in.
Yeah.
So I just want to bring that out.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Rep. Hey, folks, Jack Skaggs with the Coordinating Development Corporation in Austin Lawn. We're the Regional Planning and Development District here. Mr. Rowe's actually our chairman, so he keeps us in line during the week. But a lot of things that were said, so from an EDA, DRA, workforce development, we're your regional participant in that. And so we work very close with Mr. Rowe on a daily basis. But any of those projects from an OJT contract to training curriculum at the universities or technical schools, we would help with that. We have an office in Mansfield. And then at Mansfield Disposal, they've got one of the best attorneys for opportunity zones as well. So, and William Bradford over there. So we're well versed on a lot of these topics of discussion tonight. So we're here if you guys need that for discussion as well, with that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it's an important piece of this puzzle. I'm glad you were here for that. The North Delta Planning, which is y'all's partners over in the Monroe area, is populated with some of my former students, as are many of the others. Southeast Planning and, of course, Acadiana Planning. And so you guys are definitely the ones to fine-tune and focus many of these things. And we're here to work with you and help in any capacity we can, especially in terms of grant writing, assistance there. And I advised the DRA for almost a decade, and so very familiar with them. Their CDAP, as you know, comes open very quick, next week sometime, I guess. And so there's a lot of things we can work even now on that CDAP, laying a foundation for this project, that would be easy to go through your office. So I appreciate that a whole lot.
So on that too, with EDA and ERA, infrastructure projects, that sort of stuff, what type of water capacity you're looking at needing? Wastewater, that sort of stuff, are you gonna be able to buy water from the city of Mansfield? How close is their water line to the facility that?
One of the good things about the project is that, of course, we're going to use water, but we try our best to recycle and reuse on-site most of that. So there's not a huge surplus that will have to go into the existing sewer plant. There is some water, but a lot of garbage, simply put, comes in liquidy, and so it's not a water-dependent project. A lot of it, the leachate that you would get, say, at a landfill, we won't experience because we're all contained, and so we don't have the stormwater. But there clearly are some opportunities for us to work together, whether we're talking about a DRA, whether it's the CDAP, or some of the capital infrastructure monies that they have available as well. So.
I'm gonna phrase my last thing not as a question, I'm gonna phrase that as a statement.
Thank you.
But don't we get opportunity zone, when we talked about that, when I know in the conference in DC, we can get money from grant money for opportunity zones as well. Is that correct?
I think you're looking at enterprise zones that you're talking about. The opportunity zone money is going to be mostly private investor money that goes in for a public process. The enterprise zone monies are those money that you guys can access. But this is, again, we sit down and we have these conversations so that we start triaging what are the grants, what are the projects we go after, not for the project itself, but all the other ancillary things that may be needed for that.
I'd like to, from the lease trade perspective, that's a great question. So, say this project goes, they buy a piece of property and donate this jury a right of way for road, sewer, water, whatnot. Because it's in an opportunity zone, it'll change your match from typically a 50-50, but for the public entity in an opportunity zone, it would go to an 80-20 match, and typically that right of way donation could count as that match.
That's good.
So there is a benefit to you guys for that project being in there from an infrastructure.
Thank you.
And it's a very good point here, because oftentimes for parish or local governments, finding that appropriate match becomes really the hurdle. And what I've found is that if you have to put up a cash match of 50-50, well, heck, if you can do that, you don't need the grant in the first place. So if you can go to a 20%, and that is not just cash, but the in-kind, as he said, the in-kind piece then makes you eligible for additional monies that right now you may not even be eligible at all to go after. And that's something we can coordinate through the planning districts.
Anybody got anything else? Well, Mr. Southern, we appreciate you.
Do you want me to leave my email or anything for anybody, whether you guys or?
You can leave it with Mike, and he can disperse it with anybody who asks for it.
Perfect. I'm glad to do that.
Best thing, and then we'll get together and decide, what the jury's actual next step needs to be to get, and if we're receptive to doing something with you. So we'll discuss that in a meeting, probably, I don't know, throw it on the agenda for March to get something started.
Sure.
But we'll see how we can get something going and worked out.
Well, I appreciate all y'all's
I think
time.
it's a win-win type deal to me.
Well, I think if we're working together as a partnership, it can be a win-win for all of us, particularly the people that live here. So this is something, and I appreciate y'all's time. I know y'all got plenty of things to do besides sitting here talking trash, but I appreciate it. Unfortunately, I have way too many jokes about garbage, so you might as well get used to it now if we're going to be together. So, but anyway, thank y'all so much. And even people in the audience, I'm glad, to hang around and answer any questions as well. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn,
So move.
second.
Chuck?
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
What are those guys, Reggie? Dark, what are those guys out there? What? Those two guys, what are they with?
CDC.
Okay.
That's the president of CDC sit here just like him. This came to us. I don't quite believe it yet. I don't quite comprehend it. It's a little bit too good.